Maybe you thought you were safe with Lamar. Maybe you thought you were safe with Purdy. Maybe you got Caleb on. Well, there's so much to talk about with these quarterback, DST, and tight end rankings. Nothing to talk about with the S tier. You have Josh Allen. With Allen, you're starting him every single week. Regardless, I have him on my fantasy football team, and I want to thank the fantasy gods every week. I get to see that beautiful son of a gun out there. Jalen Hurts will be our next QB. With Jalen Hurts, he's the quarterback 5 in fantasy points per game so far this year. And this is with him, quote unquote, struggling. This is with him having one game with over 200 passing yards, and that was 226. So just the fact of the matter is when you're averaging a rushing touchdown a game in a 4-point passing touchdown format, you are just going to produce. Jaden Daniels will be our next quarterback. If we are looking at Daniels, he has averaged about 19.9 fantasy points per game so far this season. This matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers is actually going to be a pretty tough one, though, because we can actually see that the implied team total for the Commanders over the past 2 weeks with Mariota under center was actually hovering around like 22, 23 points per game. You would assume that the Washington Commanders would actually jump with their projections once you get Daniels back under center, but they have an implied team total of 22.5 points this week. So sportsbooks are telling us traveling from east to west and at the same time having to go up against one of the better defenses in the league is going to be a tough spot. Now, clearly, you start the dude if he's healthy. Now, the best matchup you could possibly ask for this week is going to be Justin Fields going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Justin Fields so far this season has played 2 full games. And in those 2 full games, he has scored 29.5 points and 27.1 points. He was the QB2 week 1, and he was the QB4 this past week. And now he gets to go up against the worst defense in the NFL, where typically the Jets project to be a bottom 3 to 5 offense every week, where now they project to score just as many points as the Washington Commanders. So if I really had some stones, what I would do is I would rank Justin Fields ahead of Jaden Daniels as the QB3, but I don't have those stones. Now, Justin Herbert will be our next quarterback. Really hate the Joe Alt injury. This offensive line is going to be no bueno. Justin Herbert has gotten worse every single week so far this year. If you're looking at his actual fantasy points scored, going from 27 to 18 to 14.5 to 12.5 this past week. Still think that this is an offense that's going up and throwing the ball like crazy. And this matchup against Washington should be a high-scoring game. Patrick Mahomes obviously was able to have a big bounce back this past week against the Ravens, where he was the QB3. What you really want for Mahomes, and we've talked about this over and over again, is you want him to be in those competitive games against those good teams. Because it seems like the Chiefs, really, if they're playing a team like the Giants, will let their foot off the gas. They won't go out there and ask Mahomes to run the ball like crazy. This matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars is one in which the spread's not that massive. Like right now, the spread's about 3.5 points. So you hope it remains competitive and Mahomes actually has to scramble some in the second half. Drake May is the quarterback 4 in points per game right now. Drake May's averaged 21 points per game, actually better than Herbert. Obviously, Drake May is actually going out there and running the ball. This matchup that you have against the Buffalo Bills is one in which the New England Patriots are supposed to get boat raced. Right now, the Bills are favored by like 8.5 points. So you should get a ton of dropbacks for Drake May, but the question is, can they score against Buffalo? Now, going over to our next tier, we're going to have Daniel Jones. The Colts project to be a much better offense this week than they did a week ago. I mean, you have Daniel Jones getting worse every single week, very similar to Justin Herbert, falling from 29.5 to 22.8 to 15.8 to 10.4 this past week. But implied team total 27 points, and you should have Alec Pierce hopefully playing this game instead of Adonai Mitchell. Now, Jared Goff, the best matchup you could possibly ask for. Now, the issue with Goff, of course, is he's not going to run the ball at all, where Jaden Daniels will give you some rushing. Drake May will give you some rushing. Right now, Jared Goff sitting with 11 rushing yards so far this season. And we can go through and look at his NFL career. He's had 1 year in his entire career where he's had at least 100 rushing yards. So just, you don't really have the ceiling from a rushing perspective. He scored 12.5 fantasy points over the past 2 weeks. But right now, the Lions project to be the highest scoring offense in the league in a great matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Kyler Murray will be our next quarterback. I understand that nobody likes Kyler Murray, but even in a game in which he looks really bad, like against the Seattle Seahawks, he still runs the ball at the end of it. He has had at least 30 rushing yards every single game so far this season. This matchup against the Tennessee Titans is one in which the Cardinals project to score a ton of points. You actually have an implied team total of about 25.5 points here. Going over and looking at our next quarterback, we are going to have Dak Prescott. With Dak, you obviously want to lower expectations considering the fact that you are not going to have CeeDee Lamb. But he had no CeeDee Lamb this past week against the Packers. And in a really tough matchup, he scored 31 points and was the QB1 in fantasy. Implied team total 25 points here against the Jets, so you can run with them. Bo Nix, just a really tough matchup, right? And Bo Nix is also running the ball a lot less. He's actually only had one game so far this season with 30 or more rushing yards. He obviously looked really good against the Cincinnati Bengals this past week, but I think anybody can look good against the Bengals. Now going over to Baker Mayfield, you actually do have pretty bad projections when it comes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. You have no Bucky Irving in this game. You have no Mike Evans in this game. The hope is that you do actually get, I don't know, a Chris Godwin emergence because Baker really does need that other weapon. Now, Matthew Stafford will be our next play. I actually think we may need to move Stafford down a bit. Is the issue that you're going to have with Stafford is, while the Rams project to be one of the highest scoring offenses in the league this week with 27 points as their total, it's a really weird matchup against the Niners, who have nobody playing, where the Rams should be able to just run the ball over and over again. Going over and looking at what we have with Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, I would like to have higher in these rankings given the rushing upside, but since you have no Malik Neighbors, it is tough. Like, implied team total 20.5 points. So right in line with what you have with like Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm putting Dart ahead of him because Dart's going to run more. And then CJ Stroud, I honestly am surprised to see the Texans, according to sportsbooks, are only projected to score about 21 points this week. Because ultimately, I would say like, oh, the Baltimore Ravens have an absolute garbage defense, so I'd assume we get a little bit more out of them. And then Sam Darnold to be our last quarterback that I would bother considering. Now, let's go over and let's look at our tight end rankings. There's only one player in S tier, and that is going to be Trey McBride. Trey McBride right now is higher lower 63.5 yards on Underdog Fantasy. Jake Ferguson is higher lower 41.5. And to be honest, Jake Ferguson higher than 41.5 receiving yards is one of my favorite picks on Underdog this week. If we are looking at Ferguson, he has had 6 targets, 12 targets, 14 targets, and 7 targets so far this season. So this is a player that's averaging almost 10 targets per game. You're going up against the Jets with no CeeDee Lamb. And on top of this, you actually have Turpin injured as well. So the receivers are decimated here for the Dallas Cowboys. This New York Jets team gave up 2 receiving touchdowns to Darren Waller last week. So I would say start Ferg. And obviously, if you want to check out any of those pick'ems over on Underdog Fantasy, I would say that now is the best time to do it because Underdog has an offer I've never seen before. After you play your first $5 with code FLOCK, you are going to get $100 added to your account. And on top of that, you'll get free questions that you can ask me in the live streams. And I'm going to be live streaming every single day until Christmas. And you'll get a free pick. It'll be something like Matthew Stafford, higher, lower, half a total yard, or Mac Jones, higher, lower, half a total yard as well. The link's in the description and comment section. And Underdog Fantasy is available in almost every state. Now, moving over to our next tight end, we are going to have Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren is maybe the most talented tight end in this tier, honestly, with looking how disappointing Bowers has been. Tyler Warren's been explosive. The projections are way higher for Tyler Warren than they are with Jake Ferguson, where he is currently higher lower 55.5 receiving yards on Underdog. But my thing is, like, Jake Ferg is the tight end 2 in points per game, and really the tight end 1 if we don't count Darren Waller. Brock Bowers will be our last tight end in this tier. Bowers has given you a decent little floor. Like, he's scored at least 8.5 fantasy points at every game so far. We just haven't had the ceiling play. The guess with Bowers is you probably have him just hampered by this knee injury where he has the knee brace on still. I have no idea how to view Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is the tight end 17 in points per game, but the target volume's been fine realistically. Like, he's sitting here averaging about 6 targets per game, and the Detroit Lions are projected out to be one of the highest scoring teams in the league this week. Then going over and looking at Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce Implied team total, 25 points. I mean, obviously, Mahomes looked much better this past week than how he had early in the year. But Kelsey's also on the decline, where every week so far this year, he has played a lower percentage of snaps for the Kansas City Chiefs. Week 1, he played 87%. Week 2, 78%. Week 3, 77%. And week 4, 68%. And the efficiency isn't great. He's only had 1 week where he's had higher than 2 yards per route run. Now, Juwan Johnson saw a complete collapse this past week against Buffalo, where he actually fell to only seeing 3 targets. And now Juwan Johnson's actually missing practice while you have some other New Orleans Saints tight ends actually getting practices in. So Juwan Johnson could slide dramatically. Hunter Henry is an option in which he's been on a roll. Like, he honestly could have even had a bigger game last week if that touchdown that was this close to happening would have counted. But the volume's been shaky. Like, he had 8 targets week 1, 3 targets week 2, 11 targets week 3, and then 2 targets the following week. And we just saw the Buffalo Bills really remove Juwan Johnson from the Saints game plan this past week. Zach Ertz will be a very exciting play, considering that you have Daniels and you probably have no Terry McLaurin. If we're looking at Ertz, it's difficult to take too much away from what he's done this year with the target volume, where he was sitting here averaging about 5-6 targets per game. But keep in mind, the past 2 games you had Mariota, not Daniels. Now, Dalton Kincaid will be our next option. Kincaid, the volume really hasn't been there. Like, he's averaging 4 to 5 targets per contest, but the receiving touchdowns have been incredible. Like, you've had 3 receiving touchdowns so far this season off of 18 targets, but realistically, you're probably going to get hit with some touchdown regression. Now, Dallas Goedert's technically the tight end 3 in points per game, but he's only played 3 games. He's had double-digit fantasy points in every game that he's played, but he's had 13 targets and 3 touchdowns. So Goddard's going to get hit with touchdown regression the same way that Dalton Kincaid will. I'm starting Dallas Goedert myself, so I'm really hoping that he comes through for us. Harold Fannin and David Njoku will be our next 2 plays. Harold Fannin played a career high 83% of the snaps this past week. And keep in mind, with these Browns tight ends, they actually may be involved a little bit more because they don't really have a choice with Cedric Tillman going down unless they really want to incorporate Isaiah Bond as a full-time player. TJ Hawkinson, I started last week. I've started TJ Hawkinson every single week for the first month of the season. And he has come through for us, and he has averaged 7.63 points. Now, team chemistry purposes, I almost want to leave Hawkinson in my own lineup over Dallas Goedert because we are 4-0, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's tough to make that argument. Now, looking over at what we have with Britton Strange, he's had consistent target volume, just not like a super talented player. 7 targets back-to-back weeks here. Going up against the Chiefs, so you assume that the Jacksonville Jaguars are forced to throw the ball. And then Mark Andrews here at 16. I'm assuming Lamar Jackson's not going to play this week, of course. If Lamar were to play, then you can move Andrews up. But also at the same time, we can say that, I don't know, if Isaiah Likely's back in, what's the real upside with Andrews in a bad offense? Then last year, Darren Waller, I understand, scored multiple touchdowns this past week, but ultimately he had 4 targets, and it's Darren Waller. Let's see it again before we start him. Mason Taylor looked very appealing. 7 targets this past week, 13 targets over the past 2, and you're in a great matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, but come on, it's the second option in the New York Jets passing offense. I think we can wait to see it before we believe it. And then looking at what we have with Evan Ingram, Evan Ingram's looked horrendous. I don't know if it's the back injury. The dude's not playing. He played 42% of the snaps the past week. There are honestly maybe some other tight ends I'll look at over Ingram, but I just wanted to make sure that he's on the list because I know this is who people are going to ask about. Now let's move over and talk about defenses. The best defenses by far are the Vikings and Cardinals. Not even close. Then the next tier, I think the Rams are very interesting going up against the Niners because the Niners have no Ricky Pearsall. They have no Jawan Jennings. And most importantly, they have no Brock Purdy. So I have no idea what the hell they're going to do. The Detroit Lions get to play Jake Browning in the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line. And just in case you have not had the experience of watching this Bengals offense, as I have, I am lucky enough to have T. Higgins on my fantasy football team. Yeah, the Bengals don't look great right now, to say the least. The Houston Texans DST obviously will be much, much worse than this if you have Lamar Jackson playing. But again, my assumption is going to be that you have no Lamar, so the Texans should be in a good spot. I know it's very weird for us to put like two defenses that are playing each other in the top 6 of the DST rankings, but this game in Europe between Cleveland and Minnesota, we can say a couple things. One, Europe games are always very weird. Two, the Browns and the Vikings, both are teams built around their defenses at this point. And 3, this game has an over-under of 35.5 points. So sportsbooks are projecting this to be by far and away the lowest scoring game of any game this week. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles playing against the Denver Broncos. Denver obviously looked good this past week against Cincy, but it's not necessarily a spot where we can guarantee that's going to be the case every week going into the future. Now, moving to our next tier, we're going to have the Indianapolis Colts as heavy favorites against the Raiders. The Raiders' offensive line's already been really bad this season, and now they just lost their left tackle. The Seattle Seahawks going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with no Mike Evans, no Bucky Irving, and you actually do have Seattle favored in this contest at home. And it's obviously a big travel for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The next tier, we're going to have the Saints. The Saints are favored in this game against the Giants, which is a little bit of a surprise. The Bills, massive favorites over the New England Patriots. The Bills, great defense, but obviously I really do like Drake May. And then you have the Giants, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Dolphins, but hopefully you were able to get somebody in like the top, I would say 9 defenses this week. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you in some way with this. And I want to remind you, if you want to check out any of those pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy, you can find the link in the description as well as the comment section. Underdog Fantasy is available in almost every single state, and they're doing the best offer that I have ever seen right now, where after you play your first $5, you're going to get $100 added into your account. And on top of that, you'll get free questions that you can ask me in the live streams. And I'm going to be live streaming every single day until Christmas. And you're going to be able to actually get a free pick for your first pick'em. It'll be something like Mac Jones, higher, lower, half a total yard. Matthew Stafford, higher, lower, half a total yard. But links in the description and in the comment section. I really appreciate you and really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.